I have a small confession to make. I'm generally not very good with conferences and sermons. And so whenever my wife would sit by me, she would either hold a bottle of water, chewing gum, or gently, lovingly nudge me just to make sure that my attention is still on point. However, I have this to say, that even though she's not here and I miss her because yesterday was our son's birthday, I have not needed either gum or water because I've been so stirred up in my spirit with just the awakening that is happening in this room. And can I just do something? I don't think it will be out of order to crave your indulgence, to please get up on your feet for a second and let us celebrate the team that has put this together, the TEDx team. Thank you. Thank you very much. You may please be seated. Thank you. I'm a dreamer, and I don't mean that in the literal sense or in the literal context of going to sleep and dreaming, even though that's very nice, because that's when I get to drive and play golf. But some of the things I like to do. But picture your average guy who either sits by the front porch or lies down and faces the ceiling and just dreams away. Fortunately for me, a lot of the things I've dreamt about in my life have come true for me. I believe very strongly that one of the instruments or the elements that fuels my very strong sense of imagination and my ability to dream is the gift of blindness. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of things that I have learned and a couple of life's lessons that I think will be invaluable to you as well, that I've learned from blindness. So to start with, I will state the obvious fact that I was born blind. No one else in my family of 6 children is blind. There is no known cause, no links, no explanation, just the reality that I cannot see with my eyes. I was born and raised in the military barracks. I don't mean the great side of the military barracks, but the other side of the military barracks. I lived in a block of 18, a small block, by the way, of 18 two-bedroom flats. I shared a flat with my 2 parents, my 3 siblings, and whatever stray pet came our way at the time, as well as my father's Honda Roadmaster 180 motorcycle, which slept in the living room with me and my siblings for fear that one of its mirrors might be stolen by morning. In my neighborhood, there was generally always something to look forward to. My mornings were characterized by news of whose water pumping machine had been stolen by morning. Or squabbles between neighbors over who had wrongly killed or eaten whose chicken. Actually, some people attempted to resolve the chicken situation by tying a piece of red string on their chicken's legs. I don't know how well it worked, but well. Now, to a child born blind, blindness does not have any physical, psychological, or social meaning. Because since I've never experienced sight, I wasn't aware that I was without sight. And so I thoroughly indulged in the innocence of young boyhood. I ran downstairs, jumped over gutters, played hard, fought even harder, and got into every imaginable type of trouble that a skinny, rambunctious young child could get into. On a number of occasions, I ran into walls, ran into people, ran into furniture so hard that an observer would shake their head and say in pidgin English, "Person wey we dey feel sorry for." No, they feel sorry for himself. In other words, The person that I'm feeling sorry for and worrying about is not feeling sorry for himself. Now, of course, my response to such a rebuke was to scurry off and catch up with my friends and hide whatever scrape, bruises, or cuts I had sustained or I had acquired away from my mother's disapproving eyes. You see, initially, I scoffed at other people's well-meaning concern and pity because I did not understand what the fuss was all about. Now, as I grew older and I gained more understanding of the intricacies of living as a sightless person in a world designed for sighted people, I was faced with the looming possibility of failure in my life. But what I actually considered to be much worse was that people were ready to excuse my failure because of my disability. Which brings me to my first lesson. Do not excuse failure for any reason or on any account. Now, I don't mean that we should be unmerciful or impatient towards those who are either less able or weak or disadvantaged, because I believe that we should share in one another's burdens because we'll all face low points in our lives. What I'm saying is this, that failure will come. But the same way that it comes, we should see to it that it goes. Instead, what I have observed is that wherever there's a larger-than-life, seemingly insurmountable flaw in a system, in our cities, in our leaders, even in our own character and bodies, we tend to excuse the failure. We overlook it, we pardon it, we indulge it, and become even comfortable with it. Sometimes, we even find different terms for the failure. In my country, we sometimes call it the Nigerian Factor. So if something isn't working the way it should, we shake our heads and we automatically do what? We blame it on the Nigerian Factor, or NF for short. And then we move on with our lives. But see, by excusing failure and blaming it on some systemic flaw, we miss the opportunity to scale through those seemingly insurmountable obstacles to elevate ourselves and elevate others. Now, I really, really was inspired by the wonderful talk that Jason Njoku gave and just how he talked about how he dealt with failure. I guess one thing I'm here to say, and I'm sure he will agree with me, is knowingly or unknowingly, he may have failed many times, but he never excused failure. So, when I turned 10, I was enrolled in a primary boarding school for the blind. Fast forward to graduation day, teachers and other well-wishers were giving us advice about going into the sighted world. We were forewarned that we would come across people who would be generally mean to us. That people would snatch away our guide canes, pull out our typewriter ribbons, and not give us the correct change, and generally just take advantage of us because we are blind. And from my experience, as I'm sure most of you would have discovered, not all public opinion is correct opinion. So I personally decided that I didn't want to worry myself about white cane snatchers or guide cane snatchers or ribbon typewriter stealers and the likes. So I decided not to take that particular piece of advice. I don't know if it was conscious, but I decided to just trust. I figured that there were so many unfortunate things in life that can happen to you regardless of whether or not you are blind. So why should I heap on an extra helping of worry just on myself? This is my second lesson, and it's a tough one, but I've learned this from blindness, to trust. Sometimes, even when I have no reason to. Now, as you can imagine, I have learned this lesson over and over again. Now, as a child, I was quite the kid to have fun with and play a few good pranks on. I'm a good sport, by the way, if I should say that about myself. My older brother had taught me how to jump over open street gutters. So anytime I was walking with friends and they informed me that there was an approaching gutter, I would jump, no questions asked. Well, pretty soon, I discovered that my friends were telling me to jump even when there were no gutters to jump over. Just so we could just so they could have a laugh. Well, eventually, we all ended up having a good laugh about it. But even after I found out, I still continued to jump when they said jump. I chose to trust them because, quite honestly, staying out of the smelly sewage gutters was very, very important to me. Now, some people might ask, can't a person be too trusting? But I think that trust has no expiration date. Blindness has taught me to keep trusting, to keep hoping, to keep believing. And by the way, in case you haven't heard, technology came along, thankfully, and not only did it take away the ribbons from the typewriter, it also took away the typewriters themselves and replaced them with computers and screen readers. And as for my white cane story, I am yet to meet one friend of mine who's had their white cane snatched from them. As a matter of fact, at some point I got too desperate, and I went ahead in my first year in university to buy myself a beat-up Mercedes-Benz wagon. It broke down on the first day I bought it. And I remember my friend who's seated in this room here, he and I were trying to change a tire, and anyone who called me, I would say to them, you know what, I'm having a little car trouble. It was a thing of pride for me, but well, thankfully, we can afford better cars, and I have a faithful driver. And of course, there's the watchful eyes of my wife, so, no guide cane stealers and none of that. So speaking of my wife and I sometimes go shopping together. Now note, I stress the word sometimes. Because while most men will share my sentiment towards shopping, I rarely feel the same way for a different set of reasons. Because shopping as a female sport, and I do believe it is, it is about feasting your eyes on goods and, well, things of the sort. So you can generally imagine how quickly I would lose interest. Now, some time ago, my wife and I, we walked into a duty-free shop at an airport. We wanted to buy a bottle of water. Before I knew it, she had stopped by to browse through a magazine, had picked up a book, had grabbed a bag of gummy worms. Seemingly normal actions to her, but I found it quite alarming. Now, here we were. We went in to buy an item, but ended up browsing for other stuff. And that was when it hit me. Sight sometimes is a distraction. Now, I have to say that when my wife goes shopping, no matter how good her intentions are to purchase only the items on her list, she somehow manages to come home with extras. Good deals, she likes to call them. She knows a lot about good deals and sales and half sales and all of that. And I have to say, my wife is a fantastic, wonderful woman. And I should add that because I'm going home to her. Now, don't get me wrong, sight is a precious gift. Sight is a very precious gift. But on your way to your destination, what you see can also be a big distraction from your goal. So, I have learned that you have to be blind in order to be focused. Focus is blindness in a sense. Most of you, I'm sure, can relate to this because you have been focused on your goals and attained your successes by being blind to several things in your life. Now, we live in a culture that esteems sight over blindness, and understandably so, and associates blindness with weakness. Yet, blindness in its weakness, in all of its weakness, I have drawn some key strengths in my life's journey. Now, when I lost the veil of childhood innocence, the brutal reality of blindness stared me in the face. Self-pity and failure loomed over my shoulder. Some, I'm sure, would have excused me if I became a failure. But I found it more fulfilling to break away from the expectations of mediocrity, to successfully navigate and negotiate my way through life, even if it ruffled the feathers of those who genuinely cared about me. In other words, person we would feel sorry for. I share the same sentiment today as I think about how the world relates to developing nations in Africa, and how even some of us as Africans relate to our own society. We treat the African continent as a disabled child. And I have to say, though, that even after I listened to Chimamanda Adichie's very brilliantly delivered talk about the danger of a single story, on my way here, I still noticed someone made an announcement about the charitable work that British Airways was doing in UK, Africa, and other countries. I almost thought it was deliberate. So we need to get them to listen to TEDx. So I was saying that we treat the African continent as a disabled child, and we are quick to excuse the failures of this poor child. She's too young. She's still suffering from colonialism. She's corrupt. She's never had any true leadership. We expect failure when we really cannot afford to. But once in a while, an individual or a group of people come along who choose not to excuse the failure of this child, but instead to stroke the potential of this child. Sometimes this child herself decides to go out on a limb, and she does something either extraordinary, either groundbreaking, or something simple when she has no apparent reason to, or seemingly has no apparent reason to. She chooses to turn a blind eye to the seeming insurmountable realities all around her. And she might, like I said, choose to do something grand and era-changing. Or she might do something quiet and simple, like refusing to allow her seeming disability rob her of the joy of living. Friends, I want to conclude by reiterating these 3 pieces of advice I've learned, or lessons I've learned from blindness. Do not excuse failure, on no account, for no reason. Trust, even when you have no reason to. And finally, and I do not mean this literally, be blind to be focused. Thank you very much.